Hey, everybody. This is Shenandoah County Sheriff Tim Carter, and we've got a special guest here today with us. This is our conservation police officer, Owen Heine, a personal friend of mine and a friend of many of ours here at the Shenandoah County Sheriff's Office. He works for the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources, and wanted to get that name's changed a few times in my career, so I want to make sure I got that all set up front. So, Owen, we're going to talk a little bit about it's that time of year, and I want to make sure I know you've been going around to our neighborhood watch groups, and you've probably been speaking to other groups about hunter safety and what's going on with hunting season and that kind of thing. So I just want to get right into it and talk a little bit about hunter safety. And I think thanks for being here today, and maybe we'll just go right into Blaze Orange and,
sure,
things that you can do to keep yourself safe out there this year.
Sure. So I would liken wearing Blaze Orange to wearing a seatbelt. Mm-hmm. It's something that's going to protect yourself from the actions of other careless people. Mm-hmm. And then when we get into talking about last year's hunting incidents, some of which were fatal, some of which people were seriously injured, you'll see where Blaze Orange and some of the basic firearm safety handling rules were violated, and they seem to be common sense, but people get, distracted or lazy or what have you, and that leads to this incident.
Right. I know I walk in the mornings, and there's some other people in my area. I live out in the county, and we all wear Blaze Orange this time of year. Even people that are walking their dogs have mm-hmm. Blaze Orange on their animals, and so yeah, we're very cognizant. We don't want to mess up anybody's hunt, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we can be seen.
Exactly, and it's for your protection. So if you're general firearms hunting deer during general firearms deer season, or muzzleloader deer hunting, and you're on the move, mm-hmm. It's required. And it's, got to be a solid Blaze Orange, because if you're in the woods, the branches, the leaves, everything's going to break up that solid orange into pieces.
Right.
So if you wear camouflage Blaze Orange that's already broken up and you get in the woods, you're invisible. So it's pointless.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So it's and you can we have Blaze Pink now as lawful as well. If you can find it. It's a tough color to find, but their Blaze Pink is also allowed in place of Blaze Orange.
Okay. I know there was a time where I usually don't do it anymore. I'm usually on the ground now, but there was a time where I would have a climber tree stand, and those things can be complicated, putting up and taking down. So did you want to talk a little bit about safety with regard to those devices, or any, even stationary or climbing devices?
I would say tree stand incidents are probably half of the incidents that we have, and they are so easily preventable. Mm-hmm. So a couple things that lead to that, I'll talk about what leads to the failures and then how to prevent those.
Okay.
What's common, some of the common themes, if you read over these hunting incidents from year to year, are, people will put stands up and just leave it. They'll leave it for years.
Right.
With the sun, dry rotting those ratchet straps, and the weather, the freeze thaw cycles, the tree is growing and putting pressure every year more and more on that strap, mm-hmm. and they fail. And so if you're not replacing your straps every year, you're asking for that failure to happen, which leads me to the next thing, is wearing a safety harness and using a lifeline. And so when I talk about a lifeline, a lot of people will wear a harness, but they won't put it on until they won't connect to the tree until they've already climbed all the way to the top. Mm. There's a lot of people that when they fall is while climbing up or climbing down.
Right.
So the concept of a lifeline is you're attached to the tree from the moment you leave the ground until you're never not attached to the tree. It's a prusik knot that has a carabiner attached to your harness, so you can clip in at the bottom of the tree. I've got one. The lifeline is right next to the ladder, so as I'm climbing, I'm always sliding the knot up, and as soon as you put tension on it, it grabs, and you're not going to fall. So And you can, as you put the stand up for the first time, you can still use this because it's like the old-fashioned straps where it connects to the tree. It's just wrapping around the tree and going through a loop. So you can slide that up, keep the prusik knot tight, your harness tight to that, to the tree a short distance, and you can slide it up as you're moving up the ladder when you hang the stand the first time.
Right.
So there are a number of incidents every year where people fall, while wearing a harness, but it's not attached to anything. Or they've got so much slack in the line that's connecting them to the tree, even though they have the harness and they're attached to the tree, there's so much slack that when they fall, they've built up a pretty good amount of speed before it catches.
Right.
And that's too much pressure for that, and it may fail.
Right.
So if you use the lifeline, it's maybe $100.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure everybody listening would say their life's worth $100.
Right. And a lot of it's just practicing, just getting used to doing this prior to going out there with a firearm and just getting used to doing it, I think.
Well, yeah, and it's
important
getting in the habit of doing it. The other thing is with tree stands is the haul line. There's a number of examples here from last year, and I can give some of those if we want to get into those details, where, if you're pulling, you should always, one of the commandments of firearm safety is basically treat every weapon as if it's loaded.
Right.
So if you are in the process of hauling the gun up to you, don't have the muzzle pointed at your face.
Right.
Have it pointed to the ground.
Right.
And unload it. There's no reason for the gun to be loaded or the crossbow to have an arrow knocked as you're pulling it up or lowering it down.
Right.
And there was a couple incidents last year where people shot themselves either with a firearm or with a crossbow arrow while trying to pull it up or lower it down and untie it from the haul line. So make sure and these are just simple things that you can do that save you a trip to the hospital, possibly the loss of a limb or maybe even bleeding out. So, they're pretty critical, simple, but critical steps you can take to save your life.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it earlier. People just get complacent and they're not thinking, or they've done it 50 times and try to cut a corner here or there, and it comes back to bite you.
I see it all the time. You get cold, you get tired.
Right.
People fall asleep and fall out of stands.
You're a little late getting into your stand. You're trying to rush, getting up in there. Yeah, I know. Yep.
But really the biggest thing is wear the safety harness and use the lifeline. And then if the straps fail, if the metal's fatigued for being out for years and years and years and it breaks and dumps you to the ground, you're falling a foot. Like you're not going anywhere. You're still attached to the tree. And a lot of the harnesses have a way to take the pressure off your thighs. When it's all that pressure is grabbing you, there's a strap that will come out and you can put your foot in that and take pressure, stand up on it basically, and take pressure off your inner thigh. So you don't black out. You can call for help or what have you.
Right. Okay. Well, then what we were mentioning, gun safety, just basic gun safety. And when you were talking about bringing that up into the stand, let's talk a little bit about that. So
if you're going to be pulling a firearm, up into the stand, make sure that it's unloaded. If it's a muzzleloader, take the cap off the nipple. If it's archery equipment, don't knock an arrow until you get in the stand and situated.
Right.
If it's a rifle or shotgun, it doesn't need to be loaded while you're pulling it up or lowering it down.
Right.
And that would have saved a number of these incidents from last year.
Right. Do you want to talk about any of those or?
Sure.
Yeah, if you had a couple, just things that you see from time to time. Because I'm sure you guys are, that's happening every year. We read about it in the news, and you guys that's things you respond to.
Sure. And actually, I've already had 2 that I've responded to in Shenandoah County so far this year.
Okay.
There were tree stand falls.
Wow.
Actually, we had one that was a tree stand fall. He was not hunting yet, but was in the process of, trimming branches and preparing.
Right.
but the stand was 20 feet in the air, and he did not have a safety harness on. And that's a long way to fall.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, yes, they are pretty common, unfortunately, and totally preventable. So one example from Region 3, which is, for us, that part of the state is like Southwest Virginia. It was a self-inflicted archery wound. The injured party was utilizing a cocking device on his compound bow, had an arrow knocked on his bow when he attached it to the haul line. The bow tapped the ladder, causing the arrow to be discharged, striking the injured party just above the knee with a pass-through wound. And, these are usually expanding razor blade tipped arrows. I mean, it's just a devastating.
Yeah, it hurts me thinking about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I usually carry, on duty anyway, I carry tourniquets. But I would recommend if you're in the woods by yourself, you need to be carrying a tourniquet. They're pretty commonly available now. Talking about slack in the stand, there was one in Fluvanna County last year where an individual fell out of the stand with the safety line breaking under his weight. So either that was from too much slack in the line, or it was from just really old.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if that line that was attached to the tree stayed out all year, but they do, deteriorate in the environment.
Right.
There's another one in Brunswick County. It was an 18-foot fall. The cables that were supporting the stand failed. And these are common. They all pretty much are the same causes every time. It's, stand failure, strap failure. And no matter what has failed, if you've got your harness, if it's cared for and you've got a lifeline, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, but you're likely not going to be injured when those things happen. And nobody goes out thinking, okay, I'm going to fall 20 feet today on a, pile of rocks and some roots. I mean, you're not thinking that that's going to happen.
And I know when we talk to people about hiking and things like that, I mean, hunting is the same thing. Hopefully they are, with communication devices that they have now, that they've got a cell phone with them. In some places they may not have decent service, but at least let people know where you're going and when you plan on being home and that kind of thing. Just little basic things, yeah.
Exactly. And along those lines, there's a missing hunter right now in Highland County, and we've got units out assisting the sheriff's office there and state police there. And last night was his second night alone in the woods in the National Forest, and it's a humongous, expansive area.
Right.
Where there's no cell phone coverage. So if you're in these places and you're going to hunt, you're not planning on spending the night in the woods, but be prepared. Bring fire starting, a fire starting kit, a survival kit. It doesn't have to be much. It doesn't have to weigh much, but bring that. He's got a two-way radio, but those batteries are almost dead, and they're line of sight and rugged mountainous terrain.
Right.
They're not. The box says it'll go 30 miles, but if there's a mountain between you, it'll go as far as it can. If you can see,
right.
Yeah, that's it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So Blaze Orange would help in this situation. If you're a missing hunter, that's how we found one a couple years ago. In Shenandoah County, he was found by a drone because it saw his orange hat, Blaze Orange hat. So, again, Blaze Orange is for your personal protection. Whether you're lost, whether you're trying not to get shot by a careless hunter, it's for your protection. And it's also the law, but, it's common sense. You should wear it for your protection.
Right. Well, look, those are most of the questions that I had. Did you have anything in addition to that you want to go over today?
So there's a couple, we call it the 10 Commandments of firearm safety. Okay. And this is something that we cover in hunter education classes, with kids. And I honestly feel like adults should take this class ever so often as well, because it's a refresher. And a lot of people that do, they go with their child to the class and they come away, man, I learned a lot today, actually.
Right.
But a couple common, I'm just going to tick off a couple of the basic ones that are routinely violated that lead to shootings every year. Muzzle control is a big one. You see, anytime these people have shot themselves with the haul line or resting the muzzle on their toe, whatever it is, it's not controlling the muzzle. the muzzle should always be pointed in a safe direction, always.
Right.
And if you have a discharge, an accidental discharge, you've shot the ground. You haven't shot your hunting partner.
Right.
And along those same lines is keep your finger outside the trigger guard. You should always never have your finger on the trigger. There was, and when you see novice shooters, whether it be the firing range, my experience is if a novice handles a firearm, even under direct supervision, a lot of times you'll see the finger naturally goes to the trigger.
Right.
And you have to break that habit. We had an incident last year where the father and son were hunting together in the same stand, and the juvenile had his finger on the trigger. Mm. And when the father climbed up in the stand to get situated and settle in, he bumped his son that pulled the trigger and shot his father.
Mm. Wow.
So, again, you can talk about when to load the firearm.
Right.
That may have prevented that, but also muzzle control would have prevented that, and keeping your finger off the trigger would have prevented that.
Right.
So these are some of the basic ones. Another common one is being sure of your target, what's in front of it, and beyond it.
Right.
And this is violated often, and that's how people end up shooting their hunting partner, their family member. We see it a lot in areas where they're running dogs.
Right.
You'll have standers in line. You've got a dog driver and dogs pushing the deer, and the deer will run through the line, and inevitably a careless hunter will shoot down the line and hit their hunting partner. Mm. And we had a couple of those last year. It's usually buckshot in those scenarios when you're hunting with dogs, but if you catch a buckshot pellet in the wrong place,
right.
Which happened early in my career. I remember one where he caught the pellet in his carotid artery and bled out before he got to the road.
Wow.
So one pellet, that's all it takes if it's in the wrong place.
Right. And life is different after that. Yeah, it's very sad.
Totally different. And this is terrible for these people that are involved. And they're all preventable. One more I would talk about is basically if it says don't run, jump, climb, a fence, what have you, with a loaded firearm. Mm-hmm. And there was one last year where a subject was walking and slipped, and of course the gun was loaded and finger must have been on the trigger, but it discharged and he shot himself. So if you're crossing a creek, if you're crossing a fence, if you're in muddy or unstable territory, the other commandments of firearm safety are even more critical for muzzle control, keeping your finger off the trigger. And if it's going to be that treacherous and technical, then unload the firearm.
Right.
And load it back when you get through whatever this obstacle is.
Right. Right. Again, it gets back to complacency and just paying attention and thinking about what you're doing. Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm with you.
Exactly. And I would like to not work another hunting incident for the rest of my career.
Right.
Nobody likes working these. The families are traumatized by these events, especially when they're fatals. And, there's a lot of people that have been paralyzed, falling out of tree stands, or they put their tree stand in a dead tree and the tree broke and fell on them. Thing again, all preventable, but just takes a little bit of forethought and slowing down and, keeping safety first, making that a habit, and wear your lifeline, wear your harness, and if the stand fails, it's not cost you your mobility.
Right. Well, Owen, I really appreciate you coming in today and spending a few minutes with us, and hopefully that our listeners will be paying attention and think about safety as they're out there this year, and have a good hunting season. I hope you do too.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks for having me on.
Sure. Well, again, everyone, this is Shenandoah County Sheriff Tim Carter. Thank you for joining us. You can find this and all of our other podcasts on my YouTube channel. That's at Timothy C. Carter. And while you're there, make sure you click that subscribe button for show updates and notifications. And please smash that like button as well. Again, thanks again. This is Tim Carter. Have a great day.